Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Keep Up with Pryme. I am Laura from Marketing, and joining me today is Aske Holst, our product manager at Pryme Global. Today, we are taking a closer look at the newest features across our applications that are relevant for law firms. Should you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat or the Q&A section, and we will try to solve those at the end of the demo. And now the floor is yours, Aske. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So let's jump right into it. And we have a number of new things to show you today. So this covers things that have changed in the latest release, but also a few of the previous minor releases that we have done. So today we're looking at the new features for legal, and we will also be having a look at the roadmap going forward. So the new features we have for this period, I've sliced up into some areas related to where in the matter lifecycle they fit in. So setup, planning, working, invoicing. And let's start up with the setup part where we create the matters and we define the master data related to that. In that area, we have project creation or matter creation, and we have a new feature for dependencies in templates. The idea being that if you have a matter where there is a structure to it, a kind of a timeline, you can define the relations between those. Now, within the legal space, that is rarely done. So we won't delve too much into it in detail, but there is a capability now to make more detailed plans. So I think for some kinds of matters, normal ongoing corporate matters, I don't think it would fit. Maybe there's a case for it for more insolvency matters. And I have a small sample. It's not really the perfect sample, I think, but I can show you what this looks like. So the idea being that you will have your templates, and I have a demo template in here. And what we've added is that you can say that when you have different tasks in a template, one task could relate to another. So we cannot, in this case, have the client meeting before we've done the specification. We cannot do the development before we did the client meeting, etc. So there are relations. And we also have some default timelines. How long time should a certain task on average take? And should there be lead time or offsets in between them? And this gives us a timeline. So in some regards, it's a bit similar to what we do with the deadlines, but here we create it as more of a timeline on the matter. So if I open up a matter in here where I've applied such a template, we can see that if I look at it from a timeline perspective, there is now a bit of a timeline to it where we do one thing and then after that there comes the next, and sometimes there is time in between. So we don't have much time to do this, but then we have to wait some time. So there could be some possibilities in using that. Then we have related to contracts, and contracts is usually what we use when we have invoicing of a large number of matters or projects, as is written here, and we want to have those as a collection that we can work with as one. We made it a little bit easier to work with those contracts. In the past, when you're adding new matters to a contract, you had to go to the matter and select the contract. We kind of switched that around and allow you to, for a certain part of a matter, go in and say, assign related project or a related matter in this case. And you could say, well, I would like to also assign this one. So you assign that related one, and then that is part of that contract. So a little bit easier, especially if you have a lot of matters that you want to add to a contract. A little bit more easy to work with. Then we have in the resources area, the possibility to copy users and resources. We can also work with resource templates. We can do imports of resources, and there's to how we work with resource group changes or resource group updates. So this is mainly for when you add new users to the system, add new resources to the system. That could either be as part of the ongoing business, or it could also be when you set up an entirely new unit or a new company, a new legal entity, and you want to add all those at once. So it's not really directly matter related, but it is part of the master data, what goes into being able to track time and cost on a matter. If we look at the template part of it, what we can do is we can have a resource template. So the resource template, in this case, it is a project manager. We could also, in this case, call it a matter manager, and that has some defaults on it. It is marked as a matter responsible. The number of the unit of measure is hours. We post this as services. All the default fields you would otherwise fill in on a template, on a resource when creating it. We put that into a template. So whenever I go to the list of resources and say, I would like to have a new resource, this resource should be of a certain kind. It automatically pops up the list of templates saying, yeah, I want it to be a manager. I have this pre-populated, all the defaults in here, and I just need to say the name of this person is Dave. And maybe there's a bit of job titles, etc. Personal data, of course, that's not part of the template, but the rest is templated in. And you can have as many templates as you would like. You can also use this to copy resources. There you don't use the template, but instead say, I would like to copy a resource. And so there is an option to copy a resource or user. And you can either decide to copy both the actual user or just the user or the resource. So if I say I would like to copy the resource, then you say, what should the title of this new resource be? I would like to copy Cassie, and this new resource should be called, let's say, Steve. And maybe there's an email address and a title. What it also allows you is to copy the permissions, potentially if you want to, or copy pricing, copy dimensions. If we have a deployment date, employment date, then we can also set a time sheet end date and say, well, we would like to create timesheets until a certain date. It'll automatically create that, etc., etc. So it only requires you to fill in the extra things, and the rest will be copied from the existing. And you could do the same with a user, saying, I would like to take the settings that Stina has and copy that to a new user, which I will call something. So you're copying over that set of settings. That could be permissions and user settings and user setup, etc. So again, trying to streamline that setup experience. The last function in this area is import resources. There's actually a button for this. Let's see, import resource, where you can add a full list of new resources to add. So it's more like a spreadsheet. So if you have 10 new people coming in, you can just add them in here, and you can select the template. That's really the idea. So you add the base information and the template, and then you can also copy information and set to create time periods, etc. So should help with those setup processes around resources. When we get to the planning area, there is a few new features in here. So we have some features for work planning. One of those is work item categories. So work items we of course use for pieces of work where we want to keep track of whether that is done or not. That is usually more on admin tasks like intake or working with agreements or other parts. But in principle, it could be any kind of work where you say, I would like to define this as a piece of work that I want to track, and people can use it for tracking time on. If you have a lot of work items, you might want to categorize them. And this is the capability we're adding in this release, where if I have some different work items, I have one here, then I can define a category code to put on this and say, this is admin work. And then I can later on something like my Kanban board, for instance, where I look at all the things we have to do, I could go and say, well, I would only like to see whatever is in the category of admin work. And I could save that as a filter. So I can look at the different categories of work, maybe across people or across customers, and see how much do we have left to do for this period of time. The other feature we have in the planning area is for budgets, that we can import those from Excel. Now, budgets are not that commonly used with matters, but if you have budgets and you have them in Excel, you can now import those. So very simply, I have a project, I have a budget journal here where I would like to import something, and you can then create an import template which creates an Excel file for you, and then later you can import that Excel file and it will fill in that budget for you. In the area of work, we have some features for time, and one of the main ones is the time tracker for Windows. And what that does is it's a new small app that runs on your desktop, and you can use it to track time without going into Business Central. And you might have noticed I actually have one running down here for the work I'm currently working on. So this is a small window. You can place it anywhere on any screen. You can, of course, hide it if you don't want to. I currently have it to be here, and I actually have it to keep on top. That's why you're seeing it all the time. And I can say, well, I'm done with this keep up with legal, and I want to work on something else. And when I'm happy with that, it'll start tracking, and then I can select my customer, saying this is a certain customer and a task, and so on and so forth. And this is all I need to do, and I'm tracking this time. So it's a simplified version of what we have in the time track in Business Central, but it runs as a standalone Windows app that you can access at any point. And of course, it always keeps up to date with whatever is in Business Central, so you can work in multiple places at the same time. If I switch back to my Business Central environment and look in my time tracking calendar, or probably I should look in my time tracking entries here, I can see that I have these also here. And as soon as I make changes to something here, then of course it also updates over here, or vice versa. If I start this and stop this and start this again, we should also see that over here that now they are started as well. So it synchronizes between those. Currently, this is released as a Windows application. We will release it for other platforms in the future, and we'll come to that when we look at the roadmap for the future. And so by this point, I think I can hide this. We have another change related to timesheets. If you are concerned about the totals of the time worked per day, we have added a small new information field here, the total time tracked on a certain day across all the different pieces of work that you've done. So if I'm tracking some time here on something, it will show up in here as a total. For purchases, and specifically for AP automation, we have added some features for creating vendor bank accounts for invoices with new vendors on them. We already had the feature to create new vendors. Now we've added the capability to also automatically create a vendor bank account. Also, when you have invoices with different rules for the rounding, we now have a setup where you can define the rounding rules for different kinds of purchase invoices so that match up with the expectations. Moving over to invoicing and work in progress, within the area of invoice creation, we have added a feature to undo the closing of invoice lines. The closing of invoice lines is, of course, something that have existed for a long time, whether you used what process you used to create invoices, you could close lines and do a write-off. And that was all well and good, but sometimes it did happen that you close something that you didn't want to close. So while we have that feature of being able to select something and close it, I would close this line, and this line is now closed. We have a write-off. If we run the client engagement report, this will show up as a write-off. But if it now happens that actually we want to bring it back, there was no easy way to bring something back that we had already written off. Now we have the undo close lines, and with that, we can bring it back. And so there's a way to get back again. So small action, but big impact when things change. In the area of intercompany, and this is of course not for all companies, but those that have multiple legal entities where you are working together and doing intercompany invoicing or sharing of costs, we add a capability to transfer binary data. That primarily means images, documents, etc. And specifically, we've added the capability to transfer document attachments between different companies. So if you, for instance, have expenses in one company that need to be recharged in another company, we can send those expenses over, but we can also include the pictures of the receipts or the PDFs, etc., between the company. Lastly, we have the area of subcontracting. If you're working with freelancers, subcontractors, somebody who does work for the company, and they are supplying you with sheets of their time tracked, or you're requesting them to actually track their time within your system, we have the subcontracting capability where we can create subcontractor statements on a monthly basis for all the work that they have performed, and we can match it up with invoices. Or we can do self-billing where we simply pay them out based on the work that they have performed, depending on the agreement and the rules and regulations in the area you're in. What we've added there is a dedicated approval workflow to those subcontractor statements. So without an approval workflow, if you have a subcontractor statement, like this, for instance, there is a simple approve button. But if you would like to have a more formal approval flow where, depending on who is the manager or who is responsible for the vendor, somebody should approve, defined on different rules, you can now enable a full approval workflow for this. You would do that by going into workflows and create a new workflow. And that workflow has to be based on the workflow we have for subcontractor statements. So we have one called Pryme Subcontractor Statement Approval Workflow. If you select that, you'll get a new workflow for this. And you can, of course, adjust that workflow depending on what should be the rules for who should do the approval, but we have some defaults in place here. So enabling this will mean that whenever you have a new subcontractor statement from here on out, you now get some options to not directly approve, but instead you can send an approval request to the appropriate approver. And so similar to how approvals work with invoices, etc. That about covers what we have for this release. Looking into the future, this is the complete roadmap for what we have currently planned for the coming months and quarters. across all the different apps. Now, all the different apps are not relevant to working in a legal space, so we've cut this down to what is more relevant to legal and accounting. Coming up very shortly, we have some new features in AP automation for better mapping of text to projects, for selecting the right accounts based on what project that invoice is for. And we also have a new risk management app coming up where you can define risks on different matters and track that, look at a risk matrix. Moving into Q3, we will extend that with also being able to track risks on vendors, on clients. Maybe the clients part is the most important. And it could even be other financial entities. It could be assets you keep track of if there are any risk related to those. But I think especially the client and vendor risk management is really interesting. If there's a financial risk to taking on a certain client, you can identify those risks, classify them, and set up mitigation steps and reviews on those risks. In a more and more uncertain world, managing risk is becoming more and more critical. Then we have some features also coming in the next quarter for client and matter setup. It is not really 100% certain in which order these will come, but there will become new features for creation of matters where someone can request the creation of a matter. It's also within the intake area. There will be a flow for requesting the creation of a new client. We will have some features for more advanced matter rollover if you're working in a structure where you are closing your matters and creating a new matter on maybe a yearly basis for ongoing work in order to not have an ever-growing matter. And then in the time tracking area, there is definitely some new features coming for working with time descriptions. One of those is time description policies, where we will allow multiple different policies. So for a given matter, you can select a certain policy that you want applied. That policy could include rules about what is allowed to have in a description. It could also be how are we wording things. And it will come in two different flavors. It will come in a flavor where you can use it to improve the description based on the policy, and also a flavor where it will rate existing descriptions based on that policy. Also, of course, taking into consideration the language, so there can be different policies for different languages. There could be one policy for German and another policy for British English, for instance. That will go together with a feature for batch editing descriptions, where you can bring up a large number of descriptions, potentially all the descriptions of text that will go on a single invoice, look at those together and make edits as one cohesive mass, things like search and replace. And you will also be able to see that review score. So you can find the texts that are scoring low, where we say this is only 70% compliant with the policies we've said. Something needs to be changed. So I'm really looking forward to this one. Within work planning, we are planning to have a feature for required skills. If there are certain requirements on what you must have as skills in order to perform a piece of work. And also we will have some predefined work sets where every time you create a new matter, there are some things that needs to be done. We add that there. I will skip over some of the subcontracting, but in the reporting, there will be a feature to update dimensions on matter ledger entries. We talked about the risk management already. For work planning, we will have capacity planning coming out into the end of the year, beginning of next year. And also we are continuing on this journey of client and matter setup with some better approval workflows for invoice review and approval. In time tracking, this is around the time where we expect to be able to deliver a standalone tracker for mobile and other platforms. And with other platforms, we are looking at Mac OS. So anybody having a Apple MacBook or similar. So we'll try to have one for Windows, one for Mac OS, one for Android, and one for iOS, so iPhones. And then lastly, there will be some new features in purchasing. I'll skip.